So this video is going to be a demonstration of how to make a 3D model and a set of plans for our stool project. Anyway, what you're looking at right here is the set of plans that you'll eventually generate. Here is page 1, and then on page 2 you can see the individual part plans. So let's get started. So I'm going to go into my folder here and I'm going to start a new document called Stool. And as you can see from the plans that I have posted in Schoology, we're dealing with a pretty small stool. The overall dimensions of the top of it, as I have in the plans, are 8 by 10 inches. You are welcome to do some modifications to that, but I'm going to be working from those dimensions for this project. So to get started, I'm going to start with a sketch, and I'm going to go to the top plane, and I'm going to simply draw that rectangle that is the top, and I'm going to make it 10 inches horizontally, 8 inches vertically, and that is my entire sketch for the top. I'm going to extrude that the thickness of my material. For this project, we typically go with a thickness of 3/4 or 0.75 inches. And there's our top. Like normal, after I create my first 3D object, I like to come over here to my project browser, and I like to hide all of the planes that I don't need just to kind of get some of the clutter off of my screen. And now I am ready to move on to the next piece. So for the next piece, I'm going to make one of the sides. And to do that, I'm going to start by making a plane. I'm going to choose offset for this plane. And what I want to do is I want to create a sketch plane that is offset from this edge right here. And it's going to be offset by 1 inch. So I'm going to click on this surface. And you can see by default it is going out away from it. I actually want it the opposite direction. I want it 1 inch in. So that's where I want my sketch plane. Now that I have the plane in place, I'm going to choose that plane for a sketch. And I'm going to look at it from this surface right here. And I'm going to start to sketch out my side piece. So to do that, to start, I'm going to use this Use Project Convert button, and I just want to get this line right here onto my sketch so I can grab a hold of it. And I'm going to use a rectangle here, and I'm going to draw that rectangle, the overall dimensions of my side piece. And if you look at the plans on the side piece, they are showing that it is narrower at the top than the bottom. You could sketch that in with the line tool right now, but I like to start with a rectangle, and I start with that rectangle so that it's the same width as the top, which is why I use the Use Project Convert button to begin with, so I can just make sure that I lock onto that particular line. And then I'm going to dimension it, the height that I want my leg, and we are going to go with 6 inches in this case. Now I'm going to use the line tool, and I'm just going to come up here and I'm going to pick a spot about 1 inch in on this line, and I'm going to connect the dots down to this corner, and then I'm going to do the same thing over on this side. Once I have both of those in, I'm going to dimension them, and I want them to have a taper of 1 inch. You can see I'm just dimensioning from one point to the next. All right, and there is the outside of my the outside shape of my leg. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a point. I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to hover over this until I find that center point. You see that square that appears right there? When I have the square there, I'm going to place a point on it to make sure that I have that in place. And then I could use the circle or the arc tool, I like to just use a circle, and I'm going to set this with a radius of 2 inches or a diameter of 4. And that is the profile of my side. So I'm going to finish that sketch and extrude just this portion of it. And I want it the other direction, and I want it 3/4 of an inch again. All right. So the next piece now that we're going to do is we're going to make the brace that is in between the two legs. And that is going to be drawn from the inside of the leg that you just created. So we're going to place a sketch there and then turn to this angle. And that brace piece, we have 2 inches wide and 6.5 inches long, and it's simply a rectangle. So I like to start by using this use button again, and I'm going to project the geometry of that leg surface onto here. And then I also want to find a center point, and that could be up here. You could also use this one down here. Either way is fine. And then I'm going to draw a rectangle, and I don't want it to be touching this line. I don't want it to be touching this arc. I want it to just be kind of in the middle here, but not locked to it. I'm going to just draw a rectangle kind of across here, and I'm going to make that horizontal dimension, or the thickness of this, 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to make the height of it 2 inches. And then I want to do a little bit of dimensioning. And here we can kind of play around with it a little bit. The one thing that we definitely want to do is we want to dimension one of these two sides, either this one or this one, to that center line. And we're going to set that to 0.375. So that way, this brace piece is going to be perfectly centered from left to right. All right. The other dimension, I'm going to click on the bottom of the top, or you could also say the top of my leg piece, and then the top of my brace. And I can play around with this dimension a little bit. I kind of want to get it to be where it is appearing to be kind of centered on here. So let's see what 1.5 looks like. That wouldn't be bad there. I could maybe go just a little less than that. So let's see what 1.25 looks like. I think I like that right there. I would say anywhere from 1 to 1.5 inches down from the top is going to probably look good. And once you're happy with that, you can finish the sketch and then extrude that profile. And that is going to be a new piece. And we are going to extrude that 6.5 or 6.5 inches. And mentioning that just made me realize that when I went down and added this leg on here, I didn't actually make it a new piece. So I'm going to go back here to my extrude to, which is when I created that piece, and I'm going to right click on it and edit. And I'm going to make sure that I have new part checked. And then I want to make sure that I did the same thing on 3. And it looks like I have 3 parts here. All right, which is what we're looking for. So anyway, now we're ready to move on to doing a little bit of extra work here. That we're missing one last piece, and it is identical to this one right here. But before we make that piece, I want to do a little bit of extra work on it. So if you take a look at the finished set of plans, there is some rounding over of some of these corners. And if we make a duplicate of this piece right now, we'll have to round over the corners on both of them. But if I do it ahead of time, I can copy all of that over. So I'm going to choose the fillet tool, and I'm going to set the radius to 0.375, which is half of the thickness of that piece. And then I'm going to choose all of the surfaces that I want rounded over, which are the tapered or angled edges and also those arcs. You can see I have all those pieces or all those edges now rounded over. I actually want to do the same thing to the brace. And sometimes you have to rotate it a little bit extra just to get it right. And I'm going to also do the same thing just on the four edges of the top. All right, now I'm liking how that's looking. I'm seeing here that I have this plane still visible and I don't really need it. So I'm going to come up here to the project browser and hide that right now. And now I'm actually going to add another plane. This time when I click on the plane button, I'm going to choose mid plane. And I want to create a mid plane so that I can mirror this leg. Okay, so basically I need to get a plane right down the center of my stool right here. So there's a couple different places you can click to do that, but I think the easiest, most accessible is if I choose this surface right here is one of mine. And then if I come over to the other side and get the exact same surface over here, that should put a plane right down the middle. And I'm going to use that as my mirror plane to mirror this leg. So now we can come up here to the mirror tool. And first thing, always check what type of mirror. Is it a part, feature, or face? We are mirroring a part this time. And it is going to be a new part. So the entities to mirror, we want to choose this leg, which I can choose from right here. I can also come over here and click on it on my parts browser. Either way, we'll select it. And then you can see that it's red here on the mirror plane. I have to click on where it says mirror plane and then come over and click on the plane itself and make sure that it says new. And as long as you're happy with what you're seeing, hit the green check mark. Now we have all four of our pieces completed. You can see that since I waited to mirror the leg until after I had done the rounding over the first one, all of that went along with it. Now I can hide this plane. And if I want to change the appearance at all, which I typically like to do, now I can go into the appearance panel and I can right click on any one of my parts, edit the appearance, and choose whatever color I would like to make it. Since we're going to be making this out of wood, I like to pick a wood appearing color. And you can make it different colors if you want. You do not have to change it to wood color. I just like to do it. If you want, you can certainly experiment with different colors as well. But anyway, that is pretty much it for designing the 3D model. Now, the next step is going to be creating your assembly and exploded assembly. So to do that, you can click on the Assembly tab down here at the bottom, and we'll go to Insert, and we'll choose our Part Studio. And this doesn't really look like it did anything. It looks like you just brought the exact same thing in as you did before, which essentially you did, but now we're in an Assembly tab, and we have the tools that go along with assembly. So what we want to do with the assembly is we want to come in here, and the main thing we want to do here is we want to create an exploded view. So I'm going to click on exploded view, and before we do anything with the exploded view, we want to make sure that we have our object turned the right way for creating an exploded view. And we want to have an isometric view, typically where we see the top, front, and right side. And in order to do that, you can rotate it around, but it doesn't really get it quite where you want it. So what you want to do is come up here to your view cube, and where you see top, front, and right side all visible on the view cube, click the corner in between the three of them, and that will rotate it to the exact view that we want for our exploded assembly. This little origin point right here kind of distracts me, so I like to hide that right off the bat too. So once we have this view oriented right, it doesn't matter if we zoom in or out, we just want to make sure that the view cube is right. We can now click Add Exploded View, and then you're just going to come in here and you're going to pick a part one at a time. I'm going to start with the top, and you can see when you click on it, you get these three different arrows here. one for each of the 3 different directions you can move it. I say 3 different directions, it's really 6. So if I click on this up arrow, I can go up or down. You want to move it in the direction that you would be assembling and disassembling pieces from. So for the top, I'm going to move it straight up. And really what you're going for here is there's not some magic amount of distance. We just want it to look good. That's really the purpose of an exploded assembly, is to look good and make sure that whoever's looking at it understands how all the parts go together. So what we're really looking for is a little bit of empty space between the parts so you can see what direction they are assembling. Once you're happy with that one part's movement, you can hit the green check mark and then click the next piece. And first you click off of it and then click the next piece. And for this leg, I'm going to move it straight out away. And then I'm going to go to this other leg. And typically, anytime you do an exploded assembly, you always leave one piece right where it started. And we're going to make that the base, or I'm sorry, the brace piece here, where everything is connecting to it and it stays right there. So that is it for the exploded assembly. I'm going to hit done. And it looks like you didn't do anything there, but that exploded assembly is saved, and you'll see that in just a minute when we add it to a drawing. One other thing we're going to add in here is this BOM table. And if we click on that, and BOM stands for Bill of Materials. So you'll get this pretty basic table here to start. The first thing I like to do is clean some of these out. So you can see if I right click on one of these, I can remove. I can also add. So one thing that I like to add is a name. So right now my names are part 1, 2, 3, and 4. But what I typically like to do is actually come back into my part studio here and give them all names. So where it says part 1, I can right click on it. I can rename it. I can also adjust properties. If I go into properties, I can give it a name. I can also add a description in here. Anything that is going to show up on plans, we like it to be all caps, so I do put caps lock. If you would like to add a description, I think it is reasonable to do so. And oftentimes all I do for the description here is put the dimensions in. And we can do that for each of the parts. And this part is, let's see here, it is 8 inches by 6 inches. Okay, and if we go back into the assembly and we take a look at our bill of materials, we can see that that stuff is getting updated. Now I'm going to delete this part number column, and I'm just going to keep these right here. I'm going to right click on name and I'm going to move that to the left. And I'm not going to fill all of this out right here because you can see what goes in it. But we should have a top, 2 legs, and a brace piece. And then as far as what to put over here, like I said, I like to keep the description and put the dimensions of those pieces in there. So once you're finished with your bill of materials and you have your exploded assembly all created, then you can come down here to the bottom left of your screen and insert New tab, and we want to create a drawing. And you should all be familiar with this by now. We're going to stick with this A size, which is 8.5 by 11, and choose OK. And on the first page, we want to put our assembly information there and our bill of materials information. So I'm going to click on Assemblies, and there should be a preview here, but it's not showing up yet. But I'm going to click on Assembly 1. And this is probably a little bit larger than what I'd like, but I'm going to place this view right around here, and I'm going to make a couple more views of it just to show the assembled stool. All right, and now that I have all my views placed, I'm going to add one more actually in isometric. This is the finished assembly that shows it all put together, and that's all the views of it, but that's taking up a whole lot of space. So the next thing I want to do is I want to double click on this particular view here. The reason I chose that view is because it's the one that I placed first, which is considered the parent view that the other ones are attached to. And I'm going to change the scale. I'm actually going to bring it down to 1/8 scale. And you can see that creates a whole lot more room. I'm going to move my views just a little bit to get them more where I want. I'm going to delete this 1/8 scale from some of my views here just because I don't need it on all of them. It shows up on this one right here. And now on this isometric view or this 3D view, I'm going to also shrink that one down. But I want to make that one a little bit smaller yet. We'll make that one 1/10. And I also like to right click on here and up on the show hide, I like to show shaded view. And that will just give me a little bit more of a realistic visual. All right. After I have all those in, I can dimension them, or I can move on to my exploded assembly. Dimensioning is just like it would be in any other drawing. We can use the dimension tool right here. And I want to just put my basic dimensions here. All right, and those are our overall dimensions. That's really all we need in this situation. So now I want to go and add my exploded view. To do that, right here where it says Assembly 1, underneath it, where it says Explode 1, that should bring in an exploded assembly. Now that is not the view we want. That's a front view of it. So we're going to choose Isometric. And that looks a little bit big to me. I can place it and modify it later, but I'm just going to, right off the bat, change it to 1/8 scale. And I think that looks pretty good right there. I do like to right click on this and show shaded view again. And now we can also come up here, and right here is our BOM, or Bill of Materials table. And we'll stick that right in the top right corner. You can see mine is incomplete right now. If I go back into my Part Studio and edit that stuff, it should all show up. But anyway, you can do a little bit of tweaking with your view placement and your dimensions, and this will be all you need for your cover page. But follow the set of plans that are in your assignment. And then to move on to the next page, you can click this button right here where it says Sheets. And then once you open that up, you can hit the Insert Sheet button, and it will give you a second sheet. And on that second sheet, you're going to place the plans for each of the individual parts. To do that, you'll click on Insert View, Insert, and then choose the part that you want to start with. You might have to change which view orientation you're looking at, and possibly change the scale to something appropriate as well. When in doubt, choose the views that you see in the assignment. And I'm going to go ahead and place views for all of my objects right off the bat. The brace ends up a little bit small, so I actually prefer to make that a little bit larger of a scale. And then for the leg, you can choose either of the legs for it. You do not have to dimension them both. Once you have all your views placed and you have them scaled appropriately, you can go ahead and use the dimension tool, just as you have in any of your previous drawings. And you can go ahead and dimension all of your individual parts. You may need to do a little bit of moving. So this scale marker right here, I want to move or delete. They're taking up space that I don't really need to dedicate to that. And you do want to remember that whenever you're making a set of plans, that your primary objective is doing so neatly. So you want to make sure that your plans are very readable. Take your time and do a good job with them. And when you're all finished up, you can print these out and make a submission in Schoology.